man walks down the street, he sees nothing but job announcements and press releases. Oh, is there nothing of interest to be found in this place? But then he sees a light at the end of the lane. He approaches, he steps through, and suddenly finds himself in Linky Land. All right. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of In Linky Land. I am Tony Albrigts, your host and guide through this wonderful journey we're on together. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I have been for the last 7 years. I think I really got into the mix in 2015. And I'm somebody who skips intros. Like, once I've listened to your intro once, I never need to listen to it again. And it bothers me. It bothers me that podcasts make me fast forward through a pre-recorded intro every time. And I understand that, you need to have something to let somebody know what it is you're listening to, right? That makes sense. But the point of podcasting is to build relationships, to build some loyalty, between the podcast producer and the podcast enjoyer. And it's just not a nice user experience, right? When I've got to listen to 30 seconds of the same stuff, and it could be a great intro, I just don't need to hear it 50 times, right? So my goal with this one is that if for some reason you decide to listen to more than one episode of this thing we're making, my goal is that you're going to listen to the intro, that you're actually going to want to listen to the intro. We will see whether I succeed in that, but I do intend to take a crack at it. It's going to lead to some weird things. That is it's called my Ayn Rand voice. I developed that almost a decade ago and refer to it whenever I want to read something in a weird voice. So thank you for bearing with me. I hope you're still listening at this point, because we haven't even gotten started. That was the prelude to the intro. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by a couple delightful people. This was my first time speaking with either of them. And one of my ideas with this podcast is to bring in people I've found interesting on LinkedIn, but to see the different combinations of people that we can bring onto the podcast and have it flow. And Aaron Barreiro and Fihmiya Hamdan joined me on this episode, and I think it flowed really nicely. I've said it before that one of my metrics for success for this thing is if there are stretches of the conversation where 15 minutes go by and I don't say anything. That happened again in this one, which is fantastic. And I wanted to talk to these two people specifically because they're community builders. And by that, I mean, Aaron has started a virtual community called One Strive, which is around entrepreneurship and founders building in public together as a sort of support group for entrepreneurs, which I think is an awesome idea. And it was funny. I didn't even know what his day job was until today when I went and looked it up recording this intro. That he does, program management for a tech company, but it speaks to the power of the branding he's putting out there. I know Aaron as this relatively young guy. He's 29, who's doing amazing stuff in bringing people together. and lifting people up and doing good stuff. So um, it was awesome to get to talk to him. He's also got a really powerful story around growing up in Texas, and then moving back to Mexico with his family um, a few years ago. And Fihmiya is also building a virtual community called Career Crafters, which is aimed at folks who are pivoting professionally. Uh, Fihmiya is an educator by training and by trade, who is in a sort of career transition herself in a liminal space where uh, I hear she might be looking for her next opportunity. But Fihmiya is also really active in the Social Saturday Squad, which, you know, if you've been around on the weekends, you know, can be a rather enthusiastic bunch. But both these people, I think, understand some fundamentals about building community on the internet, which is a topic I really care about. I run a virtual community that's support group for creatives. It's called the Rowdy Creative, and our purpose is just to help people make progress on those big creative goals and aspirations. And it's challenging to cut through the noise online, find the people who might be a good fit for what you do in your community, invite them in a way that they take you up on your invitation, and then build engagement over time. Like, all those things are challenging. So I was interested to get a better sense of these two people who seem to be doing it so effectively. I think that's about enough out of me as a lead up. All the relevant links will be in the show notes, and let's get to the conversation. Mia, Aaron, thank you for being here in Linky Land with me. I appreciate both of you being willing to come on and have a conversation. And before we dive in, let's start with who you are, where you're from, or where you're calling in from, and what I was going to say, what do you do? But to me, it's more like, what do you care about? You know, what is it that that brings you alive and brings you to the work that you do and talk about on LinkedIn? Fihmiya, how about you first?
Well, thank you so much, Tony, for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here alongside Aaron, who's been an amazing friend thus far. So I am from Michigan, but I still consider myself a Southern girl. So I still got my Texan roots. So that's like my happy place. So I am a former educator. I actually just recently resigned. I've been in the educational space for over 10 years, but I got to a point where I wanted to expand, and I knew there were other things that I wanted to go after. And community has been the place I've always wanted to be in, but it took me some time to figure that out. I've had many ups and downs, so my journey has been quite crazy. But those are layers to peel off on LinkedIn at some point. But just through connecting and really just networking with people, I found that community has always been a space that I've been in, you know, especially in my educational career, but just with vast audiences. So that's my passion. That's where I thrive in, is just really allowing people a voice to empower them. So I am currently managing a community space for career professionals who are either pivoting out of the career, they're transitioning, or they just want to thrive in their current you know, workplace. And for me, what's great about it is that I understand where they're coming from, because I am also that person who's alongside them that's transitioning and pivoting out. So definitely can relate to them. That's what brings me so much passion, is being able to relate and connect with people and actually form those relationships as well. So that's a bit about me.
Great stuff. And you used the word educator, and I noticed that on your profile as well. Were you a teacher, or was your role something different?
So I've been a teacher for over 10 years. I worked with many audiences, the lower L, the middle crowd, and then I also worked as a business English coach for adult learners based out in Italy. That was a really great project. So I just work with so many age groups. And I've also done community work for an ed tech startup space as well for customer experience. So
Cool.
skill sets all over the place.
Right on. Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, I love how you framed the conversation. I think it's great for us to talk about what we care about and not be, wrapped up in our work as our identity. And I love that, Tony, and I love hearing you talk about community Fihmiya. I've been working in Mexico actually for the past 4.5 years. I'm in Mexico right now in a city called Matamoros. My wife and I moved here first just to kind of serve and help some smaller organizations. And then as time went by, we decided to start a nonprofit to support the communities that we were living in, really give youth an opportunity to try and escape some of the hard realities that they face with drug violence and all the different things that kind of keep them trapped in the lives that they have here. And my work has always served to help drive that purpose. And so I've been working as well, freelance, remote, different things as a writer. Eventually became a program manager as a contract position for a random. I studied to be a doctor. I have a pre-med bio degree, but I ended up becoming a program manager in the construction industry. And that has been how we've been able to support all the work we do here. And then I joined Linkyland as a committed creator in February. And that kind of just transformed my approach to everything that I'm doing. And so really create a lot of opportunities to dive into my passion for community as well and create a space and then also our own private community. So in May, I officially launched a new business called One Strive. And with that, we've done a couple of things. Our pillars are to provide a free thing all the time, which is our mentoring program, to provide community. So we now have a private community called Build in Public. And then I'll be starting consulting offerings soon. So.
Brilliant. And it's worth noting that I believe the two of you have met before virtually more than once, but this is my first time actually getting a chance to talk with either of you. So hopefully we manage to keep it on the rails. We'll see. But my angle with the two of you is to talk about how you think about virtual community, since you are two people who are really active in that space. And I've got some questions as somebody who has been working on building virtual community myself, really since 2016. And I gotta be honest with you, I feel like I still don't understand it. So I'm hoping you can solve some problems for me today. But also just what you've been doing on LinkedIn this year. Let's start with that, since the premise of this podcast is my own experience with LinkedIn, where I spent. I need to go back and look at when I actually joined, but I remember I was on LinkedIn while I was in law school, and I finished law school in 2009. So throughout my career in litigation, which ended almost a year ago, it'll be a year, 2 weeks from now. I had no use for LinkedIn beyond being my digital resume. Right? Never posted a single meaningful word here. I didn't care. I didn't care about the thing. Didn't spend any time on it. And it was only once I transitioned out of law and into a business development role in the nonprofit space that I started to pay attention to it in a different way, and realized very quickly that it turned into this other thing that I had absolutely no idea was here. And this is what we're referring to as Linkyland. Is like you cross some threshold, and all of a sudden it's like, what is going on here? What is this? It's been life-changing for me since I started showing up, and I started posting daily in January, and it looks like the same is true for both of you. So I want to start with that that experience, like, what has your trajectory been on LinkedIn? You know, like, when did you start, and at what point did the platform flip for you in some way?
I would love first to, like, when you said Linky Land and you titled the podcast that, it resonates a lot with me because I kind of have like a Wizard of Oz vibe, right? And that's kind of been my experience with LinkedIn. It's like someone pulled back this magic curtain and revealed
Mhm.
our world that I had no idea existed. And I think all of our stories are very similar. Yeah, I've been on LinkedIn for forever, right? I was on LinkedIn before I finished my undergrad. I graduated in my undergrad in 2014. So all those years, but it wasn't until this year that I really began to understand. February 7th was my first official post. And, you know, for me, it was this combination of, I was in an industry, construction, that was my daily work, for the most part for the past 4 years. So the people that I had connected with in any sense, it was through that industry. And so I kind of had to make this pivot to really speak to the people that I wanted to speak to. And so it was a really interesting journey those first couple of weeks, as far as like what it was like to sort of peel back that curtain and get to know the people there. And I'm with you. It really has been life changing for me, just in so many aspects, because, you know, I tell people I did not expect the social part to be so important. I've been
Mhm.
living in Mexico for 4 years. My wife and I are both 29 years old, and other youth our age just are not in the same position in their lives, and they have a lot of different things that they work with. And so socially, I didn't really have a social life for 4 years. And to come on here and meet the incredible people that I've met and really develop friendships with a lot of people has kind of just brought a lot of more joy and happiness in my life. So I think that's one of the things that I didn't expect and has been a real privilege.
Mhm. And like going to what Aaron was saying, LinkedIn has been life changing for me as well. So I've had LinkedIn for quite a few years, but I stopped using it. And then when I decided to go back in the very beginning, I was like, gosh, what is LinkedIn all about? Is it this uptight, a very professional platform, which it is, but I'm very much a very authentic and very transparent person. I'm like, how is it going to be if I get on this platform? Do I have to be a certain way? I come from toxic work environments where it's like you're so set in like having to be a certain way. And I'm just like, I can't do that. I need to just be me. So when I did finally get on LinkedIn, I will admit, and I always tell people I was the lurker. I was the one that came on. I'm very much a very curious and big observer. I'm the one that kind of sits in the background just to observe. I think this just stems a lot from my educational background. And then once I get a feel for it, then I kind of just like start chiming in and sharing everything that it is I know through my experiences and whatnot. So when I did start actually officially, making content, I believe it was in April. Is when I decided, you know what, I have nothing to lose. I mean, I was constantly engaging with people, and people are telling me, Fihmiya, why don't you just tell people who you are? You have so much to offer and share. And of course, we all hit the imposter syndrome, right? Like, what is it that I have to say that other people are going to resonate with? And I started off going slow with maybe a few posts a week, and then it became 5 days a week. And I was like, wow, these connections that I'm really making are amazing. I formed so many incredible friendships with people on and off LinkedIn. I've met a few people in real life, which has been like exciting. And, Aaron and Tony, when I came onto LinkedIn, I didn't know what to expect. I just needed to find a different outlet to connect with people. But I didn't expect LinkedIn to be such this incredible and warm space where people are literally just supporting and cheering each other on. And I think that's where I've been thriving, is building the community with so many people on LinkedIn. I was like, wow, there's just so much to grow here, and then just so much to learn from everybody on this space. So for me, it's been amazing. And like Aaron said it so well, it's like pulling the curtain. Didn't expect it to be this. It's been this and more. So definitely exceeded my expectations for sure, being on LinkedIn.
That's well said. And that idea of professionalism is what I'm spending a lot of time on these days, where
Hmm.
it seems we're due for redefining the term
Hmm.
as a culture, as a society, and it's I do believe that we are three examples of people redefining it on the fly in what I find to be a fascinating way. Where, Fihmiya, to your point about like LinkedIn being boring, stuffy, buttoned up, like, that it seems that the way we all think about it, and it does seem to be everybody when they get on thinks about it in that you got to put yourself in a box.
Hmm.
And like for me, it was the lawyer box where it was like, I'm wearing my tie, I've got my stupid headshot with the gray background, and I try to make my work sound more interesting and impressive than it is in my about section. It got my digital resume, and all I'm ever going to say is letting you know when I've moved on to my next job or sharing press releases from my law firm, right? That's all I'm going to do, because my main concern is to not get fired, right? Like, so like that's the idea of professionalism. It's just fitting in.
Hmm.
And it does seem we're moving into this really interesting time where there is the opportunity to stand out and arguably we really need to.
Hmm.
I love I love that idea of how we're trying to transform what professionalism means. And, you know, as I've kind of navigated starting a business and working less hours, right? My ultimate goal is trying to get in a position where this can be full time, right? Creating and sharing and helping people through the work that I do. And the reality is when it comes to professionalism, there's just not enough good opportunities out there for us to try and fit into the box.
Hmm.
I've been in this cohort for people of color these past 4 weeks. And one of the things I keep telling people is there is no, like, the only reason I would want to stay to work somewhere is if I could find a dream job. And
Hmm.
how am I going to know what a dream job is? Like, no job description is going to tell me. I have to be in the culture to know. And it's just such a hard, to me, I feel like it's more of a gamble and a risk to stay employed than it is to try and build your own thing. Of course, it's difficult and it's going to take time, but if you're willing to commit and if you're willing to try and sacrifice for a small amount of time, then it's possible. And being on LinkedIn makes that sacrifice easier because there are a lot of other things that you get out of it, those relationships, those networks, the ability to have options and opportunities in places you never thought. And so I think transforming professionalism has so much to do with just the reality that what we used to consider professional is not what it was ever cut out to be.
Hmm. And it's the whole professional thing. And that's why I was just like, gosh, how do you be yourself on a very professional platform, right? Because from when I started in October, right? But I didn't really create content until April. I just noticed a shift in the dynamic on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, wow, there's actually some really down to earth, very humble, cool people on LinkedIn who are being their authentic self, right? Because for me to be in any space, if I can't be myself, then that's definitely not the environment I need or can be in. Um, so the whole term, I guess, of professionalism, I guess it depends on what angle everybody's looking at. I mean, if you're looking at it from the angle of being you, then I'm all for that. I'm definitely going to be the one running in that space. But I do recall when I first started on LinkedIn, not knowing what it was about, I was following a certain crowd. Not that because I didn't know what I wanted, I did, but I was like, let me just get a feel for it. And I'm like, gosh, we're not really meshing too well. And I'm like, it's because it's a group that I just don't get vibes from. I mean, I don't know, I don't want to say it in a bad way, but it's just like I need to find the group that understands Fihmiya, what Fihmiya is about, right? And when you do really kind of like hone in and kind of niche down on what it is you want to bring, like the value to LinkedIn, your your community comes to you organically. Now, do they come overnight? No, that takes time, a lot of time. And we know, Aaron, that building engagement is probably one of the hardest things to do in community. I mean, I've been doing it for like, I don't know, it'll be a year in like November on the platform where I do it in the space. But I've always said you need to build that foundation, right? Just like on LinkedIn, once you kind of build that, that's when everybody kind of just kind of, attracts to you as a magnet, as opposed to you following a crowd. Why don't you just build your own community space? And that's where I just decided just to be me, and we're not everybody's cup of tea, but that's okay, right? So
That
they'll organically come to you.
that's really well said. And Seth Godin is somebody whose work has deeply influenced me in how I think about leadership, entrepreneurship, how to be a human being and a professional in the internet age, and actually education as well. And his take on education is that what schools should be teaching kids now is how to lead and how to solve interesting problems. And for me, listening to you talk, leadership is largely about being willing to be out front, right? And not to be trying to have power over people, but to just say, this is who I am and this is what I stand for. And so when I hear you talking about, I wasn't really vibing, I feel that. As somebody who's torched a legal career twice at this point, I like lawyers. As people, we tend to have different priorities. I tend to be way too weird for most lawyers. And the opportunity here, and this dovetails with what you were saying, Aaron, about when you were saying that if you look around, there's a problem of opportunities where and this is another Seth Godin thing that I've picked up on, but is this meeting of the industrial age with whatever the hell it is we're in now. This, call it the connection economy, the internet age, whatever you want to call it. But our education system set up in a way that's sort of a factory model, right? Where we're supposed to fit in and raise our hands and wait in line. Employment is largely the same thing, right? Where we're supposed to be cogs in corporate machines, and I don't even mean that. That sounds worse than I mean it. It's just a reality, right? And I actually found myself the position I left with the law firm last year. Yeah, I understand that I'm a cog in the machine, but I had come to believe that they were going to have a hard time replacing me. That like I was key to building this office from one attorney to 7, and look at all we've done. And are you sure you're going to be okay without me? They still haven't actually replaced me, and everything's going just fine. The role that I was occupying was one that they've kind of like figured out a patchwork solution. But point being, we're not necessarily as essential in those machines as we want to think we are, right? So it's like, how do we step out and like you're saying, Fihmiya, own who we are and show up genuinely, authentically, talking about the things we care about in a way that then other people who are interested in that stuff can find us, right? And
because Tony, I left. So when I resigned, it was because I couldn't be my authentic self, and I had made a post about that, where I felt like a fraud. Here I am promoting community and being authentic and having this transparent voice where you can be you, but then I was in an environment where my voice was capped. I was like, oh gosh, this is not fitting well. So I had to make a decision and I left. I mean, it was time, it was coming. But I was just like, here I am doing what I love, and then here is something where I cannot be me. So I had to make a choice. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I would rather be in a space where I'm promoting what I love to do and provide that for people to be empowered and feel supported and thrive and grow. And I know that Aaron can speak a lot on that too. We all want to belong somewhere, right?
Mhm.
But we want to belong in a space where we're accepted too for what we have to offer. And for me, being that previous position, I wasn't given that, and something just did not sit well. Um, and I was just like, I need to get out. And like you said to Tony, about like they replace you so fast. You're like, wow, I guess I wasn't really that essential anymore. I was like, they replaced me within a week. So that's why I always say, we can't, like, who we are cannot be tied to our job. We're tied to ourselves. We're tied to our brand, because that's what we carry with us. We don't carry our job. It's just our job. It's just that title. But who we are and who we present to people, that's the most important thing, because then you're thought of as a thought leader if you can build that respect among people. And I'm sure, Aaron, you would have tons to say to that.
Well, and I think really focusing in on this part of not being tied to our jobs, because it's just a frame of mind that we use, right? It's we aren't replaceable because we ourselves as unique individuals can be replaceable because the system calls for someone to take that position. Now, if someone takes that position after you, yes, they replaced you in the sense that they were doing what you were previously doing, but they will never be you. But that goes to why we need to stop identifying ourselves with our work, because just because a system can replace you doesn't mean that you are ever replaceable, because we're all unique. We all have our own story. And that's why this change of what is professionalism is so important, right? Because essentially you're choosing to say everything of me matters more than one part of me. And so when I talk about the different things that I talk about on LinkedIn, I talk about my identity. I'm willing to go into what it's like to be a Latino that was born in the United States, raised as American, and then come to spend as much time as I have in Mexico for the past 4.5 years and kind of deal with all the things that I've been dealing with in that time. We have that space because we choose it. And I've chosen to say, I would rather be a professional that shares all of me as opposed to just part of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
That's
Aaron, going to that, like, coming from the Latino background, I'm Middle Eastern. So right away, like, my name, Fihmiya Hamdan, just like rings bells. Like, who is she? What is she? And I always, sometimes the first question I get is like, what are you? I'm like, well, why don't you ask, like, what is it I like to do for fun? Why don't you get to know me first, and build that bond with me, make that connection. And then, down the road, if the conversation flows, ask me, but I think that's, if we want to be considered a thought leader, you really have to build that foundation of trust with people. People are not just going to come to you and open themselves up to you. You have to build that, create that warm space, and then people are going to come to you, and just want to have a conversation. Nobody wants to be talked at, they want to be talked with. So big difference with that, and then having a conversation. Sorry, Tony, I know I probably intercepted you.
No, that was fantastic. And Aaron, what you're saying um was powerful. And I'm one of the reasons I was interested in talking to you specifically was how you talk about being a person of color in the United States, and you're moving between the States and Mexico. And you, I I do think about this idea of stepping out and being ourselves and owning who we are, and we are not our work, and how do we detach our feelings of self-worth and identity from the job we do or the profession we're in, because as you're saying, that's like a small part of who we are. And I would argue that the more you sort of identify with it, you may be setting yourself up for problems down the road, because eventually we're not going to be that, right? It's like it always changes. But one thing I write about somewhat routinely is my own alcoholism, and like I haven't had a drink in 12 years, and it was something early on I decided I was going to kind of lead with that. And part of my thinking on that was, like I check just about all the privilege boxes in a way that, you know, like, I'm aware that I can take risks that are harder for other people to take. And so like Alcoholics Anonymous, based on anonymity, you know, for so many decades, it was that way specifically because being an alcoholic was being a degenerate, right? Like somebody who should be fired, somebody who should not be brought into a company or given an opportunity. And so like, that was one thing I was mindful of then. And again, now with where I'm at playing around on LinkedIn, the stuff I write about now, I would not have written about 2 years ago, because I very well may, I certainly would have gotten a talking to. I would, and I would have been told to stop. And had I not stopped, like I would have found myself in the position, maybe Fihmiya, where you found yourself, where you're saying, well, looks like I probably need to get out of here. But I find myself again in this position of redefining professionalism, and again feeling that feeling of being able to take risks that I feel at this point at 40, and again checking all those boxes, where my hope is that actually, how to articulate this effectively, like I'm inspired by seeing like you and other people of color who are doing that on LinkedIn, because to me, it does look like, in a way, the safer path. And it like feels, I would imagine it feels riskier to, again, not focus on just trying to fit in. And you had said being raised like as a Latino, being raised as an American in Texas. I would imagine it feels riskier to put yourself out the way like you are on, again, a professional networking platform, which tends to be, again, like ruled by middle-aged white men, right? But so that's a really inarticulate and roundabout way of setting up a question about how you think about that aspect of risk and you putting yourself out there and leading with those things. Because for me, like I see those as huge benefits. Like for you, like you're on my radar with some of your skills and some of the things you do in a way that you never could have been if you were behaving yourself, right? If you were just focusing on fitting in, and the things you lean into become assets. Like to me, they then become positives. So I'm wondering how you think about that.
I think that it's a huge shift for us to think like that, and for people of color, it is a huge risk, right? At first, it's hard. It definitely is hard. Something hard to articulate. For me, I don't see it as a risk because I don't think I'm putting my family in jeopardy, right? I think for me, when it comes to risk, that's like highest up there. If I'm doing something that's gonna cause problems for my wife or for people in my household, like that's number one risk. And so when it comes to this, it is opportunity for me. It is this ability to be proud of who I am, to be proud of where I come from, and more than that, to show other people that their story matters, that and that's what drives everything I do. And I honestly don't think about, and we all have privilege. You know, I come from, my privilege is that I don't plan to look for a job my entire life, right? And so I also don't worry so much about, oh, well, will someone read this or will someone, you know, misconstrue what I'm trying to say? Because my plan is never to work for someone, you know, in 3, 4, 5 years. And so when I think of other people who have that idea of like, I am looking for someone, can I come out, talk about this? I can understand why they see it as a risk. And it all just depends about how you go about it. I don't try to be divisive. You know, I believe that the only way things can change is if we work together, right? It's why we believe in community, because the more we can do together, the more we can build off each other's strengths, then the better this world will be. And so I think that's a big part of why I also wouldn't worry in general about my content. If someone sees it, the way it reads, the way anyone is inspired by it. And I've come to realize that over the past, 8 months, is like, it doesn't matter. It's, yes, I'm trying to speak to people of color, but I've had all kinds of people tell me like, hey, the fact that you talk about this gives me the freedom to talk about alcoholism, or gives me the freedom to talk about, because I see you doing it and I see you trying to just be helpful. And so I lead with it because I think it's important. I think it's needed in our world, and it's, the approach to creating equity and an equal environment in the world of work needs to include the voices of people who have not been heard for a long time. Like, they just needs to allow them to share their stories, to share their experiences, to feel like, hey, why is this important? Because those experiences impact how they lead, right? Like, if we want to tie this to professionalism, everything that they've experienced, the things that I've experienced in Mexico, I can have a calm head in any situation, because there have been some things that have just been insane that we've had to go through here. And those impact how I could lead in an organization, how I could lead in my own business, how I can lead in the community. And if we try and always shutter those stories, we're just missing such an important part of how someone is going to bring themselves to a work environment.
And Aaron, it's like creating that platform, right? Creating that space of diverse voices. So if we're really encouraging and motivating people to be themselves, right? Like really authentic and being transparent, then we also have to be that. We have to be that model, that example to our members in this space, because people are very observant. They can tell when somebody's being a fake, right? And when people are not being authentic. So if they see you as the role model, the example of being, true to yourself, Aaron, then they're going to also do the same, where they feel safe enough to do the very same, to speak up, to feel empowered, because they do want to be supported. I mean, we all want to belong somewhere, right? But we also, like I said, going back, we want to be in a space where people can accept us, for what we have to offer and what we can bring. Like, what value can we bring to the people within our space? And that's why, for me, community is such a big deal, is because I can be me. Going back, I could never be that, because I was always told what I could do. And not just going back to you, Tony, I probably would have gotten in trouble if I was in a previous job position. Like, what are you doing? Why are you on LinkedIn? I probably would have been reprimanded for it. But I can't be my full self if I'm tied to a workplace that doesn't allow for that. So that's why on LinkedIn, hopefully, some amazing company will see for me and be like, ooh, I like her vibe. I like the fact that she can be real, and just be herself. That's exactly what I'm looking for, working in a space. But we're the ones providing that platform for everybody, because we have a vast audience, right, on LinkedIn. There's so much going on, but I love it because we get to connect with so many different people. I'm a learner, just like Aaron. So providing that and building these communities and growing them is super important. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to dig into the communities y'all are building, but I want to get your take on, what is it about LinkedIn specifically that allows for, Fihmiya, you keep referring to like laying a foundation of trust that can be, the basis of community. How is it that this social media platform seems conducive to doing that, when just about every other social media platform appears to be a cesspool contributing to the downfall of civilization in one way or another? Thoughts?
So, okay, so LinkedIn, right? It's like the platform for me where I can brand myself, not brand myself to my company or to someone else. It's branding it for me, right? In the sense of I'm letting people know, right? Because I say because I control it, right? Um, what I want to be known for. So whether or not Fihmiya is in the room or not, you at least get an idea of what I'm like. You get a feel for my vibes, um, and what values I would bring. Like, what do I want to be known for? What is it that I could offer to other people? And just building that for people allows them to understand what am I what I'm about. And I think thoroughly just listening to people, for me, just looking at LinkedIn, I'm able to like understand people's pain points, their challenges, and I see common patterns with people. So for me, that's like another segue into getting into like building communities based on what value could I bring to people on this platform through my storytelling, through my experiences. And it just takes, like Aaron said, it's not about who just reads it and about the amount of likes you get, right? It just takes one person. If it impacts them, then to me, I've done what I've needed to do, is really making that positive impact. And I feel like on LinkedIn, I can do that. On other social platforms, not so much, but I feel like I can do more of a positive impact here more than anything else. So,
Well, and just the platform is important. Like
mhm,
LinkedIn has a pre-built filter where, because it's a professional social media platform, the mindset people bring to LinkedIn is very different than any other social media platform that's out there. And that's so important because what we find on LinkedIn is this focus and ability to have people really listen to our thoughts and who we are. And we don't have to try as hard to stand out because people are so much more receptive, right? If you think about, becoming a thought leader on a platform like YouTube or Facebook or TikTok, whatever platform you want to think about, you have to work 10 times harder to stand out because people
mhm,
don't care about seeing you succeed. And LinkedIn is not that. People here believe in opportunity, believe in success, believe in
mhm,
creating. Like there's been this movement of people who, hey, we want to see others win. And the bar that we have to meet to accomplish that is just lower. And that means that we have a space to actually share what we think, and people are going to listen, people are going to read it, people are going to give it more time.
mhm,
Yes, you still have to stand out a little bit. Yeah, there's still work to be put in. But because of that pre-built filter, the people here bring the best of themselves most of the time. There are some people who still don't, but overall, when you meet someone online on LinkedIn and then you meet them virtually, they're better in person. And that
mhm,
just speaks to what comes onto the platform. And I think ironically, right, this idea of having a professional space has actually been the reason why creativity and diversity of thought and all these things is able to have a strong foundation on LinkedIn because of the people that are coming to the platform.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
And it
what
allows for like a creative outlet too, right? Because I've had people reach out to me in DMs that don't really engage with my content, but just will send me a direct DM, which is fine. Um, but they'll just tell me like, how do you do it? How do you be yourself? What I have to say may not be liked by other people. I'm like, it's not about everyone else. Just put out your story. I'm like, people will resonate. They will relate to you. I said, you may not think they will, but they actually will. I said, we're all unique. Nobody's story is the same. We may come from similar situations, but our story is ours and ours to own. I said, just start up with sharing your passions, your experiences, what you've learned in life. I said, and then you start kind of building that. So it's interesting with the DMs that I've gotten with people just really just asking me questions, but I'm okay with that because that just means that what I've have had to say and still do, it really impacts people in a really great way. And this again ties, Aaron, to what you said about seeing people win, I mean, the room is big enough for all of us, and the fact that I've gotten such a great community that supports me has just been phenomenal. Sometimes I'm just like you guys, taken aback. I'm like, what am I doing? Who are these people that I have in my crowd? I mean, they're just amazing. Like built so many amazing friendships that I would have never ever anticipated being on LinkedIn. And I tell my friends who are not on LinkedIn, like, what's going on LinkedIn? I'm like, well, you definitely need to get on. I said a lot. So they think it's like an uptight space. I'm like, it's not. You have to see it for yourself and experience it too. And, there's always, like a friend says, the good, the bad, and the ugly of every platform, right? But um, it's what you decide to be a part of. I guess that matters too, as well.
I tend to tell people that you just need to find your corner of the internet to preach from.
Mhm.
The magic of the internet is that it has infinite corners to stand on and preach from. Like, you are able to pick one. You can pick whatever one you want, and you could pick a different one tomorrow. Just start doing a totally different one tomorrow, and just sharing, to your point, Fihmiya, sharing your story and what you care about and what you're about. And then that will over time resonate with, I mean, it's possible. Maybe it won't, but chances are,
Mhm.
if you show up consistently and you share genuinely, yeah, that does resonate with people. And that is how we can, start to gain some traction, like, on that platform. I definitely think that's true. And while on one hand we've spent 20 minutes talking
Mhm.
about a new sort of professionalism, I do think that there's something about the old idea of professionalism that actually contributes to how we're able to pull back the curtain, as you said, Aaron, and kind of own things in a new way and gain traction so fast and gain so much attention so fast, which is to say, number one, I do think the filter of professionalism has people just on better behavior than other
Mhm.
places that feel more like it's just like a collective id. It's just whatever is in there is going to come out. Um, that helps. And then also, and this is something I talk to people who are starting out about, it's like the bar for, as you use that term, Aaron, for gaining traction, it's like you just need to be more interesting than press releases and job announcements. How hard is that? Right? Like, if you are willing to just show up and be real, you are almost by default going to be more interesting than 95% of the things being posted on LinkedIn. And on a platform with 800 million people and infinite digital real estate, you can carve out your little niche uh, very quickly. Aaron, you look like you're about to.
Well, yeah, and I think it's the filter is so important. The bar is so low, and call it chance, call it whatever you want to, but the people that are on here are good, and they're on their best behavior, but they're also really good. The people that have sort of trailblazed the content creation space on LinkedIn give back. And ironically, I'm saying ironic more than I thought I would in this conversation, you know, I think it's salespeople that have done that. And to me, it is ironic because we see salespeople as these terrible people that just want your money. But the good salespeople of LinkedIn, the way they go about things, and they understand that they can win and others can win. That's sort of like become this really strong mantra of LinkedIn, is like, we know that everyone can win on this platform. Like,
Mhm.
there, when we talk about the 1% of creative, like people that are engaged on LinkedIn, I don't think people realize that that literally means there are millions of sets of eyeballs that are needing to be fed there with content. And so there's this very well understood idea among the people that are sharing and building their platforms on LinkedIn that we don't need to cut anyone out. And it's just this, I don't know what it was. I don't know how it became that way. I think it's sort of one of those perfect storm scenarios where it's just the platform was bringing the right people to it. The people that decided that they wanted to start sharing had the right intentions. And now that pattern of how we go about it has sort of been set, right? Because there's a really clear guidebook when you start creating on LinkedIn that is passed down from creator to creator. It's like, you follow these rules and this is what people care about. You provide value, you be engaged with others, you comment, and it's going to go well for you. And that's the framework that's passed down to each person as we help other people create. And that has led to an environment that's very healthy.
It's almost like Stephen Covey, what he says, you think win-win. It's like the 7 habits of highly effective people. You kind of like begin with the end of mind, seek first to understand, then be understood. So like creating like these environments, like you said, Aaron, it really is just a win-win situation when we can just let people know that there's plenty of room for them to grow. And then being a model example of that, just really empowering them and saying, hey, there's room for you too. It's not just it's we, it's a team. I think then people become a bit more receptive to wanting to own their story and sharing it with everyone else. Because I've noticed that a lot of people are just scared, right? They're scared of putting themselves out there because they don't know what type of engagement. And I tell people when I first started out, I didn't get any likes. I didn't get any engagements, but I told myself I'm not doing it for them. This is like LinkedIn is very therapeutic for me. I'm like letting people know who I am and what I'm about. But engagement is a big deal too. If we talk about engagement, then we need to engage with people, right? Not just them engaging with us. It's got to be a two-way street, right? So tell people you got to engage. You got to talk to people.
On my list of questions, I have one that I wanted to float to the two of you, but I think that's what you're saying on those points is so spot on. That somehow LinkedIn encourages generosity, that it actually creates an incentive to be generous, which is really wild. But Fihmiya, you are over 4,700 people in your network at the moment. Aaron, you're 5,600. I'm small potatoes compared to both of you. But one thing that I've seen a few posts recently where people are saying, I've decided I'm only going to like connect with people who respond to or engage on my content. That this idea, Fihmiya, what you were just touching on, this idea of reciprocity. And I think there's I understand where people are coming from on this stuff. I think there's a misunderstanding of like, if I'm going to comment on your post one time, then essentially like you owe me a comment, one comment on my post. And to me, it's number one, not everybody's in the same life situation. Not everybody has the same amount of time. And I say this as somebody who spends way too much time on LinkedIn.
Me sometimes. I'm guilty of that too, Tony, sometimes.
Yeah. It's so much
I got
fun.
to time block myself.
Oh, me too, Toad. I have to. But then, like Aaron at 5,600, building communities, having a ton of engagement, the number of people that you would be responding to is going to be very different than somebody who just started posting a month ago and whose stuff is getting seen, getting responded to by 7 people, right? It's a very different reality. And then there's also the aspect of the algorithm that I think this sort of post miss, which is just because you're seeing my stuff doesn't mean I'm seeing your stuff, right? Like that those things are not equal in a way that I think can sometimes feel, and I know the feeling of like, I don't see this person on my stuff when I comment on their stuff routinely. Do they not like me? It's like that feeling. And then
I've had somebody tell me that. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
weird thing. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because I found it was about around the time I broke 3,000 or so that the thing started to take on a different shape, where it was like all of a sudden there's more stuff going on, and I'm adding more people to my, like let's say like community level, like people who are becoming more like friends than just social media connections. And it became a real challenge, and I still haven't figured it out. So figure it out for me.
Okay. Okay. So let's just be real, Tony. Like, it's still a challenge for me. To say that it's not, I would be lying to you and everyone else that is like listening. And I'm one where I'm just like, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, I need help. Now, this is coming from someone who really, really, really struggled with asking for help because I felt embarrassed and ashamed, but this just stems from other things. But I've gotten so much better. And I do ask people, how do you time manage? How do you time block? Because Tony, it does get overwhelming. Trying to keep up. And like you, I don't get everybody's post in my feed. And I feel bad. I'm just like, I hope they don't think I don't like them, because I really do like them. But I try to time block myself to give myself some space to, job hunt, to manage this space, and then give myself to my family. It's like I really got to prioritize time. So I still struggle with it, Tony. But a really good friend of mine, Clay, had always said, you just do the very, very, very best that you can. And that's what you got to remind yourself at the end of the day, but throughout the day, I'm doing the best that I can. Um, I did have someone say, like, I didn't see you engaging on my post. Do you still like me? I was like, of course I do. I said, but I try to be on certain points of the day so that way I can spend some time on LinkedIn, but I still got like so many other things. I mean, I told him, like, I do the best that I can. I mean, I try to bookmark, um, specific content creators. Not to say that not everybody else is great. I do, but I really want to make sure that I hit their posts too. So I bookmark their post page to get them, but I'm doing the best I can. So sorry for those that are listening that I haven't like engaged with, but it's hard. It really is super hard to keep up with everybody. I'm sure Aaron would agree that it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard, and I think it still is important though, right? And I think anyone
Mm.
that is believes in building community on LinkedIn knows that like there's a big difference, right? It's one thing to like expect reciprocity, and it's another thing when like there are just some people who don't ever engage with the
Mhm.
audience and the community that they build. And it's sort of this, almost sadness that kind of comes across. I think like someone like me, someone like you, and other friends that I have, where it's like this person who literally has hundreds of people that love to engage with them, and they never anything back, right? And so I think it's just understanding the balance. And I think intention here is key. And this is where we get into brand. This is where we get into like how all of it comes together, where it's, hey, if you are always talking about, being a caring person, building community, you show it by always engaging, by always giving back,
Mhm.
then people have grace with you because, yeah, they understand, but they feel it, right? I think one of the most important things is really creating space in the comments. What I always tell people is when you're starting on LinkedIn, the first important habit to build is posting. Once you have
Mhm.
that habit down, the second most important, well, what becomes the most important habit is now to comment and to engage. And so if you can create space in your comments where you have those conversations where people feel, and I don't know, with my own content, I'm glad that that's what I try to do. And I don't know, but there's a lot of people that do love to just comment and hang out whenever I post. And I think that just helps build that. And then, yeah, I do very intentionally, try to find hacks to make it quicker to be able to go and give back because I want to at least be intentional about it. So I have
Mhm.
the bookmarks, the heads that engage and like your posts are really helpful because you click on them and it opens the profile right away. And so I go through those lists of people that engage and just see if they posted, try and give back. But it's, it comes down to your goals, right? What are you actually trying to do on the platform? And there are so many different ways to go about it. And, if your goal is to be here and to just give as much of yourself, and it's not something where, it's not business or it's not this, then it's definitely really, really hard to just make that your priority when it's not. We have to be realistic with people's time, right? I think that's what it comes down to, is like, Fihmiya, you're looking for work opportunities. You're not building a business right now. You're not, right? You have your family. And so people have to be realistic with your time, that, LinkedIn is not your business model either. So there is no need to have an expectation that you have to give back in that sense.
Yeah. And Aaron, like piggybacking off of that, I have to say, with the people that I've networked and connected with, have been really, really understanding. Because when I go in and I ask them, like on the side, like, what does your time block look like? How do you manage everything? They're also like in the same position of, prioritizing family with work, with LinkedIn. So they understand. And I've never gotten anything negative from anyone in regards to that, because I really do try my very best, and I do make sure that I do engage with people on my content, like on my post, but I also make sure that I go out there and engage, right? So to me, if we're building this community, we have to like really kind of like dig deep with our audience, our members. If we want to understand them, we have to listen to them. I mean, Bob Berg has a really good book. It's called The Go Giver. And he always talks about giving so much, because the rewards of what you get back, not that we're expecting anything, right, is like 10 times fold. It's just, there's just so much beauty and just giving back to your community, because we all want to thrive, right? We all want to grow. But it's better, as I say, to do it together than it is to do it alone.
I am waiting on a copy of The Go Giver that is arriving in the mail any day now, sent to me from Texas by Sean Keller, a friend I've made on LinkedIn.
Oh, awesome. I have the PDF. I can give it to you too.
Then
yeah. And Bob Berg, by the way, he's phenomenal. I've written some posts about him, and he's someone that just jumps in. He's very humble. He actually talks and makes comments. I'm like, oh, okay.
We will
one day people are gonna be saying that about you, Tony, as we have the author on here.
Sure. Yeah, that's it's been fun having my first book in the world for the last month. I don't know that I have aspirations of reaching that level of author fandom, but it has been cool. And you never know. It's to circling back real quick to Aaron, what you were saying about the most important habits, one around contenting, and one around commenting. Then I wouldn't have written that book the way that I did if I hadn't started hit and publish every day in January. That it was like that, developing that muscle where it's like, like I've posted 220 times this year or whatever, and like I don't have to think about whether I'm posting on a given day. And at this point, the muscle is strong enough that I had systems early on where I was dumping a bunch of ideas and developing posts over time and trying to schedule them ahead of time and using Buffer to schedule the posts. And by the time I got to around April, I was like, like I was seeing the world through the lens of somebody who writes in public about creativity every day. And so the posts just start coming, and the idea for the book came, and I was able to pump that out in less than 5 months, from idea to like having the thing exist. Which is just to me, it speaks to the power of the platform in like, there's the relational aspect where, I mean, I never would have sold I've sold more than 100 copies of this book, and that never would have happened without, like, there's audience and there's community. And I think of both those things on LinkedIn just would not have happened. But then there is also, like, the book itself wouldn't have existed if I hadn't been putting in the reps of writing that way. And I think that's one of the, I was going to ask a question about like tips for beginners, but then you both just dropped some gold there for people who are looking to get started. But it really is the magic of the thing. It's like the power of making stuff and the power of connecting with people who are interested in the same stuff you're interested in.
And then Tony, you know, because with your book, you've built these connections with people, right? You've built your own community that's organic, people that have really gotten to know who Tony is. And like, wow, you know, we really like him, you know, we like his vibe, we like what he brings to the platform itself. And because you've established that trust, right? First and foremost, then you've built these genuine relationships with people that you've created a bond with, that you've connected with. And that ties very well to community. Because when people say, what is community? I'm like, everybody has their own definition of what it is and what it looks like to them. But if you tie in genuineness, connectedness, and relatedness, in that sense, it kind of bridges everything together, the gap between you and the people around you, and then forms hopefully a thriving community.
And, you know, going to, you know, you wanted to ask the question of like tips. I would say like we've been pretty blushy about LinkedIn this entire time. Like we obviously all three love LinkedIn. That said, like the first weeks are hard. And so, you know, want to be realistic. If someone's listening to this and they want to get started sharing and creating on LinkedIn, and they can be hard. Like even if you're not writing for business or attention or anything, it can still feel like a letdown when you see one person engage with something that you put so much time into. And like the buildup, right? One of the something I shared a few weeks ago is like, we talk so much about changing your life and all these opportunities that when people finally get to want to put that first post on, like they have so much pressure and anxiety on themselves because there's so much writing on it when they finally get to it. And so one like on that post is really hard. And so what I would say is, I've told people, you're either just the most incredible writer in the world and people are going to come to your content no matter what, or you have to understand that you're going to have to pay attention to those first three people. And so definitely post and get your stuff out there. But if someone engages and someone likes your content and they're part of the industry that you want to be talking to, go to their stuff, you know, comment on them, you know, spend a couple of days doing that, send them a message, say hi, thank you for being the only person that engaged with me. But pay attention to those first 2-3 people, because believe it or not, those first 2-3 people are going to be the ripple effect to having 50, 60, 70, you know, every time you post.
Amen to that. That is spot on. And it is, I think about when things started to flip for me. I tell people post 50 times before you worry about it. Like before you worry about the metrics, just do it 50 times. And it was really only after maybe 150 times for me that things really started to flip. I mean, I was getting traction before that, but in terms of the thing where like the opportunities really started blowing up, it was like 6 months of posting every day. And when we start, like, we're not entitled to anybody's attention. Like, just because we're posting doesn't mean anybody should pay attention to us. So I think part of what we're earning is, well, the trick is earning people's attention. And part of earning the attention is establishing a level of trust that you're going to be here tomorrow. So it's like
consistency.
It's so huge. Is and God bless them, the people who slide into my DMs to ask me to go like their post when I've never seen their name before, and they've got 2 people.
I get a lot of those, Tony.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you being in Social Saturday, I would imagine you get a ton of that. But it's just, that's not how it works. That's not how. You've got to keep doing your thing and keep reaching out to connect with other people through content, with comments. That is the way. And I still, like Chris Sellers, my creativity doppelganger out of Australia, he was like my first troll. And like we're still great friends. You know, like I Zoom with him more than just about anybody else on through LinkedIn. But yeah, like that was back in November when like both of us were like, if we got like 6 reactions to a post, it was like winner. Yeah.
You see, Tony, when I first posted, like I told myself it very well may get traction or not, and that it may or may not suck. So I already put kind of put it out there like, who am I doing it for is what I would ask myself. Am I doing it for to get the likes, or am I doing it for Fihmiya to really just share her story and for people to get to know who I am? So I had to sit with that. And it is very hard, like Aaron said, to get started. To say that it's so easy, no, it's very overwhelming. It's stressful. There's some sense of anxiety, varying levels depending on the person. Because I've mentored people, kind of coach people in my space where they're like, I don't know. I was like, listen, just let me know when you do, tag me, and I am more than happy to come in there and support you. Because that's where a lot of people get stuck. They have something to say, but they just are scared to put it out there. So for me, even if I don't see a lot of people commenting on a post or engaging, I'm like, you know what? That was once me. I'm going to comment and I'm going to engage on that post because I know exactly what it feels like to be in that person's position, kind of scared, overwhelmed, not knowing who's going to check out my posts. But I also tell them you also have to engage with people too. It's like you walking into a room full of people and you're just staring at them, but you don't say hi or engage. I'm like, you have to talk. You have to engage with people. Otherwise, nobody's going to know who's Aaron, who's Tony. If you're just standing there staring, nobody's going to know who you are. We all have to start somewhere. And by no means am I an expert. I'm just being myself every day. And I still struggle sometimes. I do still sometimes have the imposter syndrome of like, is what I'm going to say today going to matter? But I was like, let's just go back to why you were here in the first place, so.
And bottom line is that no single post we post actually does matter. That whether or not a single post works is it should have very little bearing on our quality of life or how our life unfolds, right? And it's part of why this podcast has a silly name. It's like at the end,
Land.
while I take the work I do very seriously, and I hope to have a lot of impact over the course of my life, it is important for me to not take myself too seriously. And then particularly when it comes to engaging on social media, remember that it's social media. Now, I told y'all that I intended to stick to an hour. We've now been rolling for an hour and 10 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time, although arguably I've already not been respectful of your time. So
it's like, let me go past another 15. I'm kidding, Tony.
Well, I told you at the outset, you don't have a hard stop. We'll roll with the full 3-hour Joe Rogan treatment here. But as we dismount, obviously people can find y'all on LinkedIn. Are there other things? Well, I asked that as a question. I know there are other things you want to direct people toward. Where else can people find you, support you, engage with you?
So I'm obviously on LinkedIn. I'm also in the crafted careers professional space for anyone who is looking to thrive in their current position, but also is looking for some empowerment, motivation, and also branding pieces by Caitlin herself within that space to really kind of grow where they're at. And I'm also in Slack. I've recently learned that's where all my community builders are. They're living in Slack. So I am also there if people want to also find me. But more than ever, I'm literally here on LinkedIn, like you, Tony, how you say you live here, but I'm trying to block. So that's where I'm at.
Definitely find me on LinkedIn. It is my hub, if you would. That said, you can find information about what I'm doing on my website. It's onestrive.com. I do have a newsletter. We share an email guide to your first year on LinkedIn. So kind of talking through not just the first 30 days, but actually building a habit that you can do it for 1 year, you'll do it for as long as you want to do it. So you can find that there on the website. Just go to sign up and you can join. And yeah, we have a private community. If anyone is a founder that's interested in using LinkedIn to build their business, our community is called Build in Public. And the idea is really creating space for founders to build their businesses in public, share publicly their wins, their losses, and then have a private space where we can talk about some of the more behind the scenes things that they wouldn't want to share publicly. But we do both because we think that's the healthiest way to build your business.
Cool. That sounds up my alley. I think I'll come join you in there, actually. All of those links will be in the show notes for today's episode. And we may have to do this again because, as you may have noticed, we didn't actually get into your other communities. We did not make it that far. So thank you so much for being here and for confirming my hypothesis that I could have two people on here whom I've never talked to, and that we could have a rich conversation that flows super easily for an hour. So thank you both for the time today.
No, well, thank you, Tony, for having us here as well. And to you, Aaron, for connecting me with Tony. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. I can't wait to see where Linky Line goes. Like, I'm a big vision person, and I'm imagining a show with animations and all these different things. So I don't know where you're going with it, but I'm excited.
Well, if he has a show, we better be a guest on there, right?
We're going full on Saturday morning cartoon. Is that where we're going with this?
Sure.
Thank you so much to Aaron and Fihmiya. Again, you can learn more about their communities through the links that are in the show notes to this episode. You can also find them on LinkedIn. Their profiles will also be in the show notes. If you appreciated this conversation, I would appreciate a review on Apple. It really helps us out. And subscribing to the podcast would also be fantastic so that you get a fresh episode dropped into your feed every Wednesday. Also want to mention my book. It's now roughly 5 weeks old, In the Creative Arena: Why Creativity is Key to Building Your Future. I really believe it. And it's been so gratifying and lovely to see how generous people have been in picking it up and reading it and reviewing it on Amazon. Thank you to everybody who's done that. I think that's about enough out of me. Next week, I'll be back for an episode I'm real excited about, where I'm bringing in a couple LinkedIn friends who have become friends IRL, in real life. Until next time, I will see you all in Linky Land.